Welcome to Typecasting, pop culture by the numbers.
We are taking it back to the place where it all began. The boys are back, and we are not doing High School Musical 3.
I know, I was like, wait, did I have my notes wrong?
I feel like with our characters today, we're very much like going back to high school, rehashing old memories, and just it's a blast from the past.
Well, I love that. I'm very excited today. I'm so excited for the title, Daddy Issues. I'm pretty sure I came up with that, and I was very proud.
That was actually going to be the song that I was going to sing.
What song is called Daddy Issues?
It's one of my favorite songs by Demi Lovato. All these daddy issues. It's so good.
No one would have known that. I would have.
I trust Demi Lovato's fan base.
Fans out there. Okay. Well, that is your host, Lucas Graydon. And you know what? If you lived with an abusive family who made you live underneath a staircase, I would let you live with me.
Thank you. What an odd offer, but I appreciate the hypothetical.
Well, because you know how Sirius offers that to Harry. Yes. It doesn't work out, but I would work harder. I'd figure out how to break a blood curse.
And that's your co-host.
Okay. I'm watching Downton Abbey. The accent's a little harsh right there.
And that's your co-host, Murjanatu, who 100%, and who was really my partner in crime. We did not need 4 marauders because we had our 2 marauders, just you and I.
And you know what? There's no backstabbing happening here.
That's true. We're like we don't need a pedigree, so we kept it to only 2.
Yeah, just keep it tight. We don't need James either. I think we're Remus and Sirius.
I agree. I do think we're Sirius and Lupin.
Yeah. You picked a weird,
we'll get into it.
The last combo there.
Do you put Remus before Sirius? You
just said Sirius and Lupin, and I said Sirius and Ray. Doesn't matter. I'm not being nitpicky.
I hear you meant first and last names.
Yeah, you picked one first, one last, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know. And again, I'm going to show, I feel like in this one specifically, this episode, more than the rest of them, the books are different than the movie. There's just more material in the books.
For sure.
And I did watch compilations of the films, and that's what I'll be referencing today, but I know there's a lot more. And you know what? The other thing, just to kick off, we are not Snape fans in this house.
That's true.
So if you're a Snape stan, you might want to just cut this off early, because I give him no pardons. I do not like him at all.
I agree. And I do appreciate that warning, because there will be there will be Snape slander in this household.
There'll be slamper. Slamper?
Snape slander.
Okay.
I know. Actually, it was one of those things where I was like, what? Spoilers for what is not happening for the rest of season 3. I don't think we're going to type Voldemort, because it's typing villains. I kind of enjoyed myself with some of them, but we don't need to talk about all the terrible people. But I do feel a little bad about typing Snape.
I did too.
The type.
I did too. I think we'll get there. But he's definitely just very unhealthy. Yes. I'm so excited though for this episode. Again, I'm talking about Harry Potter. I have so many world building questions too that I hope you know.
Ooh.
So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk. I'm so excited. You're introducing most of the characters this week. Tell me about Sirius Black.
Sirius Black. He is part of a long family tree of quote unquote pureblood wizards, the Black family. The Black family tree is very sacred to those blood purists that really don't like muggles. They look down upon muggle-borns and people who intermarry and stuff. And a family of all Slytherins. And so when he, at 11 years old, goes to Hogwarts and meets his future best friend, James Potter, and is sorted into Gryffindor, he breaks this like centuries long streak, and he becomes very much the black sheep of the family. He runs. I thought when you were referencing an abusive family that you would like, let me come live with you. I thought you meant Sirius and his abusive childhood, because he really does,
That's true,
in James, find a new family. And he is kind of spiritually adopted by James as his brother because he's not welcome in his own home. And it's the home that then, after a series of unfortunate events, another great book series, he ends up trapped on basically house arrest in the house that he grew up in, hating. And so in Grimmauld Place, which becomes the headquarters for the Order of the Phoenix, and he is like trapped there. He's going stir crazy. He also then, in between that, we should probably mention the other big event in Sirius' life, which is that he is framed for the murder of James and Lily. And everyone thinks that he is the secret keeper, that he knew where they were hiding, and that he gave their location to Voldemort. But in reality, Pettigrew gave their location away. And he is...
This is where I have questions. This is what I just don't understand. Like, I get that it's not great that he... But, like, Voldemort killed James and Lily, correct?
Yes.
And everyone knows Voldemort killed James and Lily.
Yes.
So even if he did do that, I don't feel like he murdered them.
He did not. I feel the justice system in the wizarding world is barbaric. The only prison we ever hear about is like the maximum security prison. There's no middle
and they're
ground
there for life.
We hear about.
Well, and it's just so weird that like I was like watching these scenes and I was like, why would everyone know Sirius Black's name? Like, I'm like, is there no true crime in the wizarding world? Like, he's not that big of a deal.
I think
like, and also like he easily could have been like tortured into doing that, and I don't feel like it's that like I it's not good, but like people call him a murderer many times, and I'm like, if Hitler got the location out of like places, houses, because like I think it's all an allegory for like World War II,
right? Very much so.
I don't think that person is a murderer. I don't think they did the right thing, but I think it's like really intense.
There is kind of a big leap in logic that he was a spy and that it was his plan all along, that they're just like, oh, it must have been Sirius. He must have been working for Voldemort the whole time. It was his plan all along, which, like, where does that come from? I do think people know what happened because Harry ends up, like, people are like, what just happened? And people end up researching, and then Harry becomes famous, and Lily and James and their story also becomes famous. But inside of Hogwarts, because these professors like live forever, like they were also taught by McGonagall. And so I think the people inside of the wizarding world, the people of Hogsmeade, they remember the days of the Marauders and of these kids who then grow up to lead like these tragic lives. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll buy that. And then we'll get there.
Yes.
Cool.
So that's kind of his story, but his personality, he is very like daring and bold and impulsive and reckless. And he's a true Gryffindor in that way, like very fearless. And when he is finally free, he is escaped from prison and his innocence is proved. He looks to Harry, and he's Harry's godfather. And I think he looks to Harry as a friend more than as a child. And he and Molly, we talked about this a little bit with the Weasleys, come to blows as the war is escalating about Harry's place in the war. And Sirius wants Harry fighting right beside him. He sees Harry as an adult. He wants him to run into the front lines. And Molly sees him as a child, which I think is really interesting. But I have a few more notes, but I want to get into the types. So what do you think Sirius Black's type is?
Oh, I'm curious about your other notes. I was like listening, like it was a beautiful story. I love when we describe them and trying to guess what you think. I believe he's a 4. I think he is very much in his emotions and nostalgia. What?
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
The sounds you're making are not, you've never done this before.
I'm just stunned.
Really? Really? I think it's like very rational. Okay. I'm interested to hear what you think. I'm just look at his outfit. Like, the man's on the loose and he still like refuses to shave his shaggy hair and like his beard and like wears those kind of clothes. Like,
he's a fugitive?
Yeah, I know. Cut your hair.
Where? In the bathroom that he has?
Everyone like, does it in every spy movie ever. They go to a bathroom and they find some scissors. Oh, or maybe the magic he has at his fingertips. He does have a wand. So, like, I think it's pretty easy. But anyway, I'm just saying, like, if he has all of the magic in the world and he still, like, wears clothes like he was in the 80s, that's a very poor thing to do. He grew up in the House of Black where he did not believe in pureblood culture. And I felt like that made him feel really misunderstood. And he is incredibly nostalgic. He calls Harry James multiple times. He kind of lives in the past. Obviously, a lot of that is because he lost 12 years of his life at Azkaban. But I also think that, like, part of that is, like, that's where he felt seen and heard and loved. And he is really empathetic to Harry's emotions, if not putting some of his own emotions onto Harry, which is a sign of an unhealthy four. And so I think he's very in his emotions. He's a little off the walls and challenging and like doing some kind of interesting things. But I think that's like, he was in jail for a long time, where I think like at his core, who he is he's kind of the heart of the group, where like James is playful and fun and silly. And again, we're not getting too much into the Marauders. I don't know a ton about them. Remus is kind of the logic. I do think that Sirius has a lot of the heart of the group, and that's why he never fit into his childhood home. And the Marauders for him bring so much of that love and life and like truly understand and know him. And like part of him being at his wit's end is that like no one can understand what he's going through or what happened. And like, I would never do this. And I was just thinking about how hard that must have been for him to think that Remus believed the story. And I think that's like a lot of this, like the terrible things of what happens. And I think he's really interesting, but I do think he like also goes, I'm interested because you did focus a lot on like his future and like wanting Harry to be in the war. So I'm interested, because I felt like that wasn't a ton on my mind, what you think he is.
Okay. Yeah. I can kind of,
maybe I just like type guys with long black hair as a force. It's like Loki, Bucky.
Right, exactly. I don't know if maybe the 4 just didn't cross my mind because all of those points are very well made. And I think that there can be, one of our good friends who get caught between the 4 and another number. And so I think that there can be confusion here. So maybe that's where this is. I thought I was between a couple numbers, but 4 was not there. I think that he is a 7. He reminds me a lot of Fred Weasley, actually, because I was kind of thinking about the 3, but I think he is the like gas of the Marauders. Like James is the ringleader, but Sirius is the one who's like running around. He is, I think, kind of the driver of let's go do this next. Let's go do this. Like, what's the biggest prank we can pull? He is also in a lot of ways. And I think this is really interesting. They are bullies in high school. Like when we look at the Marauders in the past and their relationship with Snape specifically, he is also the one who I think gets a little bit more joy than he should have out of humiliating people, because I think he just finds it funny. He's just looking for the laugh. And with, as I was mentioning, yes, then in the future, he is headquartered in Grimmauld Place in London in his childhood home. And all he wants to do is be let outside. Like and I think in a lot of the ways, I think a lot of these comparisons are actually, and even to your point about his appearance while he's on the run, also remind me of his animagus, because he is a dog. And he spends so much time in hiding as a dog that I think he even talks about it in the movies. Like James suggested making the change permanent because he had so much of that energy of like just a Labrador, and so I think when I found myself describing
but it's not a Labrador, it's like a very sulky, what kind of
he's
dog
like
is
a
it?
Big black dog. Like but
it's not a Labrador. There's a very big difference between whatever the big Yeah.
I see
but I feel like a
him.
lab's like happy, and he looks more like a shadowy type of dog.
Yes, after 12 years in prison. But I'm also thinking about their stories of fun.
I know, that's hard because also you're picking, there's a lot, like I said, in the books. So that's why it might be different. Because I also...
So,
yeah, okay,
that was to say, I think some of the reason he has that appearance is because he is more like his animal form as a human than some animagi are, because he spent so much time there. And so I think that's why when he's on the run and like he's so shaggy and haggard, it's probably also because he spent so much time as a dog, but also in that way that he like just wants to be let outside. Like he wants to be part of the action. He's always fighting to be on the front lines. He also, in that way that I think Seven sold onto their childhood. And this is 100% just a representation of his trauma, because he has that arrested development of like being locked up right out of high school. Obviously, Hogwarts isn't a high school. He's young. He's like 19 when he's locked up. And he then, I think, is holding on to that childhood with everything that he can, with wanting to see Harry joining into the fight without really thinking about the consequences of like what that means. It's just him having his best friend back again.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So that, I think, leads me to the 7. And I think I could also see the 8, like I thought, but that was also in that like brash and bold. And
I could see the 8
in him. This is the question that I had in his arguments with Molly. Are they 2 8s arguing about how to best protect the people that they love? But again, I see him actually driven by that want to like have fun with Harry, reclaim his youth with Harry, and use that friendship. And what is actually safest for him and what is actually like best for the order in the long run is like, Sirius, you have to stay here because you were a fugitive. And he's like, yeah, but I want to be out on the front lines. I want to be making a difference. And I think he can lose sight of the larger purpose for that like more immediate gratification.
No, you're right. I think that's I think I would believe the 8 before the 7. Because I do think he's reckless. I also I don't like using the Snape's memories as actually what happens if he was actually a bully, might have made. I do think I see the poking fun. I also think that's how his household definitely I do think that's part of his childhood. If he grew up with Bellatrix and we're just mocking people and making fun and how cruel they are to one another, I can see how that would be a lot less vicious, and he had to come to terms with it because they are young,
right?
And in my mind he gets better, but I do think maybe 4 was I just was thinking he's very moody, and there's one thing where there's one part specifically where he's there's light and dark in all of us, Harry, and you can't just trust that you're automatic, you are bad. And I think that I took that more as a lesson he's learned because he's in a dark place a lot of the time. I was thinking he's in his emotions and the world's out to get him. I think he does have some 4 characteristics, and I think where does 8 goes to 4, right? 8, 4, and 2 are connected all the time, right?
2 goes to 8 and 4 off the top of my head. 8 goes to 1. No, 8 goes to 5 and 2 because Alexander Hamilton was an 8 who went to 5 in stress.
Yeah.
That's how I remember sometimes is thinking about different characters.
Meanwhile, I black out after every episode. I don't know what happened. Okay. So, 7 or 8. Yeah, I definitely still like my argument for the 4. I hear you're saying I do think you have a lot more context, and I think that colors it differently. And I think I could see the 7 as well. I wish we just had more of it. I really wish, and everyone says this is not an original thought. So I do wish instead of a Fantastic Beasts, we got the Marauders. I wish we got to see their backstory. And especially because they just all have such tragic ends. I think they deserve kind of the replay.
I have a fun fact for you. You may already know this. This is about, speaking of all of their tragic ends, and this technically doesn't work in the movies because Pettigrew dies in the book and he has a different end. He doesn't die in the movies. But on the Marauders map, I've got my replica behind me here. It says their names in order are Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. which is Lupin, Pettigrew, Sirius, and James. Mm-hmm. And that is the reverse order of how all 4 of them die. So, like, the last one on the list is James, and he's the first one to die. And then Sirius, and it's the reverse order of how they all die, which is really sad.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, the other thing I was just questioning is, are people's anime, how do you say it, plural?
Animagi is like 2 wizards.
Animagi?
Yeah.
Is it the same as their Patronus?
Not always, but sometimes. I'm trying to think because I don't know if Sirius ever casts a Patronus, but I know like Lupin's Patronus is a wolf, so it's not like the same because he's a werewolf, so it's not like the same. I'm sure it can't but obviously James's was a stag. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm just realizing? We're just like processing our Harry Potter feelings right now. James's was a stag and Lily's was a doe. I don't know if it was always a doe or if it was a doe because she was like James's. It's just making me feel kind of icky because then like Snape shows that he loves Lily by like casting a doe Patronus, but that also is like defining her in her relationship to men, and it's just making me feel icky, which we're just we're just processing our Harry Potter feelings.
Honestly, there's a lot of complicated feelings about all of it, but I also feel like it's just gotten so huge, you know, like there's just like, I don't know, she might have done that so quickly, and I don't know, it just got so big, you know. But okay, cool. So I think I could do the 7. I can. I don't feel like great about it. I liked the 4 idea. I was happy to welcome into the club, but I also think I might just be like, oh, dark hair, long. Welcome home, buddy.
Dramatic.
He is dramatic. He is very dramatic.
He's so striking. He's got his iconic mugshot where he's like laughing and looking around in Azkaban.
I know. See what I mean? He has a lot of 4 in him.
He's dramatic. He's a drama queen.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give it to them, but I'll give it to you. But I don't feel good about it.
Thank you. Well then, who's next? I know we've already talked about him a little bit.
Oh, this is one of my favorite characters in the whole series.
Me too. One of my best friends, he is her ride or die forever.
Oh, really? I was just thinking, like, if I wasn't on mic saying that George Weasley was my man, it'd be Remus. But I do think he's great also. Like, he is, and he's also old. So, yeah, me and George, it makes more sense in the time of the series. So Remus Lupin is we meet him first as a professor at Hogwarts, the new defense against the dark arts, which we all know is like cursed and like no one can be in it for a long time. But like he is the first good one we have in the series.
He's the only good one. Oh, it makes me so sad.
Yeah, he's fantastic at it, and he's emotional with the students. He doesn't scare them, but he explains what the real threat is, understanding like we're on the brink of war. And I so appreciate his character. But then, like, as we get further into the story, we find out that he is a werewolf. And werewolves are really, like, frowned upon for some reason in the wizarding world community. Like, as if they have a choice in it. And he's a werewolf. And so he has to learn how to cope with that. And that's, like, one of the main reasons he's kind of a recluse. And so we find out, though, like, throughout the series, we were just talking about that, like, originally, his, like, childhood, he was best friends with James Potter, Peter Pettigrew, and Sirius Black. And he has so many beautiful memories. And the thing I love about Remus is that even though he has this history with Harry's family, he, like, introduces himself as an individual to Harry and doesn't, like, put all of the expectations of the world and fame onto him like literally everyone else does in the whole series. Mm-hmm. I just like watched his introduction to Harry, and I mean he's just very kind. He always has the chocolate on hand. And it's just a sweetheart. And then in the end, he gives his life at the Battle of Hogwarts, fighting for what is right. He falls in love with Tonks. They have a baby. I mean, I just felt a little like it was a little like, again, I did not write them. I don't want to like critique, but like so many people died. And I don't know if it was like 100% necessary that like Tonks would have just given birth and then like gone to battle. And like same with Remus. Like I think like not all of the Marauders had to die. Because I don't think it literally symbolized anything. Like if it was okay, you're gonna tell me something. Go ahead.
The word on the street is that Tonks and Lupin died as a mirror to James and Lily. James and Lily's death ended the First Wizarding World War, and Tonks and Lupin die as new parents at the end of the Second Wizarding World War. So like Teddy being orphaned by the war is a mirror and calls back to Harry as the last orphan of the First War. So
okay, then give me one of them. Like they don't all need to be gone.
Exactly.
You know?
Yes.
I do. I hear that, and if something happened, maybe it does, and we just don't see it. I've like read so many like fan endings, about Teddy that are really beautiful. But anyway, that's fine. Okay, I'll give it that. So that's Remus, and I'm curious what you think what number he is.
Oh, my dear sweet Remus. I love him so much. I'm very torn on him, so I can't wait to hear what you think. Okay. Between two numbers, because he is empathetic and he's such a good listener, and he like is so attuned to the kids who feel out of place. Like obviously Harry, who he develops. I love the third movie. It's a little controversial, but it's my favorite. And I think that movie does a really good job of showing the way that like Remus sees Harry and is just there for him. And he just understands that like, oh, I thought that your Bogart was going to be Voldemort, but it was actually a Dementor. He helps him process those feelings of what are you really afraid of? He's observant, and I think even from a young age he's the most mature and the most responsible of the Marauders. And he talks to Harry about how he regrets letting his friends treat some people, especially Snape, the way that they did in school. But the Marauders were his people, and they gave him this space where he was feeling so alone as a werewolf, and he valued that friendship more than being able to stand up to them, and he regretted that in the future. But all of that, to me, like I'm so torn between the type 9 and the type 4. Like for me,
what? I was literally smiling. I was like, oh, we're gonna be on the same page after you said the whole thing.
What is happening?
We're so out of sync today.
Because I think the 4 was my first thought. And I think just looking at his childhood, and he was bitten by a werewolf at a really young age, he is literally like so lost and alone, and he has no place where he belongs. And Hogwarts is that place for him, and the Marauders are that home and that family for him. But he lives his entire life being misunderstood. And he lives his entire life being afraid of sharing this secret of being fully known by another person. Because like if somebody sees everything that he is and like this darkness that he has inside, that like he's so used to people leaving or being afraid that I think he battles with a lot of shame about like his true self in the way that I think is very type 4, and in the way then that he has that empathy in those deep, to me, I think he's very sensitive, very attuned to his feelings and to other people's feelings. And so for me, I'm like, oh, such a 4. I also see in the same way though, the 9, where 9s are like the best listeners on the Enneagram and so good at sitting with people in hard stuff. And I think in those teenage years where he feels like he doesn't do enough to stand up for these kids that his friends were picking on because he felt safe and secure in this group, and he grows up and he thinks, gosh, I wish I had done more. And I can see some of the struggle of the 9 in there, and he's so forgiving. I think he's one of the most forgiving people in the series, and I think that's where I saw the 9 as well. So it was very like evenly split between the two. And I'm so excited to hear where you were at.
I literally thought you were going to say he's a 6. Because I was like,
okay,
yes,
okay.
This man is such a 6. He finds such stability and complete understanding in his group of friends. And he is so loyal to them through the end. And I think he is such a healthy 6 that he can see that and ask for forgiveness and trying to make himself better and still honor and listen to Sirius when he's there. And he's like, I don't like you, but tell me what's going on. Like, I need to understand the situation. The fact that he prepares the students without making them afraid, I think it shows such a healthy 6. That he's like, all right, we're going to go in this situation. We're going to face our fears. We're going to face our bogarts because there's nothing worse. And like, I love that he goes in front of the classroom and he like risks them finding out he's a werewolf by like, handling the Bogart in real time. I love that he always carries chocolate when the Dementors are around because he's prepared for the worst. And he is such a good listener and such a true friend, but values Harry as like himself because he is like, he's an evolved 6. Like, and I just think he's like one of the healthiest and like best examples that we've had of a 6 so far. So it's really surprising to me. I also can see some of the 9 in him. Like, I think I see a lot of that like reserve. I don't really see a lot of the emotion. I think he's empathetic. But I think like 6, when they have like a really good connection with others, they can do that, and they can get edgy and testy, and when they're upset or angry, like 6s can. But he really just appreciates and loves his people, and because of that, he chooses them again and again. But he's also just like very like he's in a good place in health, except for maybe the fact that he's like still figuring out the werewolf stuff. I think that's like there. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah, no, again,
I have so many
it's
notes
like
on this.
Similar to Sirius, where I'm like, these are all great arguments, and I don't disagree with anything that you said. And I think on the whole, I agree with you. A couple notes that I have on the 4 and 9 that I just want to like share, but then I also have some notes, and I do think I see the 6.
Okay.
So for my research this week, I kind of went off the rails, I'll be honest. And I was just reading the Harry Potter wiki, which has like surprisingly, I think, some very good insight. But I pulled this quote and I literally don't know. It sounds familiar and I think it's adapted from a quote from the books or the movies, but it's just in the text of the paragraph. So it was just written by whoever wrote the article. And they said, his greatest weakness was that in his desperate longing to belong and be liked, he was neither as brave or as honest as he should have been. And that this is obviously talking more about him in his youth, and I think in the way that he interacted with the Marauders. And unlike some of the other characters in Harry Potter, we do get to see him as an adult too. And I know that it's hard to compare with childhood, but like that desperate longing to belong and be liked was very type 4. And as well as you mentioned with the boggart being the full moon and his greatest fear being the secret about his true self and this side of himself that he is so afraid of opening up and of somebody knowing about him, felt very, his literal worst fear being the full moon felt very type 4 to me. On the other side of it, I see a lot of the 6 too. Like he was very much the most responsible of the Marauders. Like he is the one getting them out of trouble. And he became a prefect in their 5th year and was like literally one of the students in the castle, keeping everyone in line and making the responsible decisions. And in the way that 6s are so responsible and prepared and always thinking about the worst case scenario, like, okay, let's reel this back in. Okay, let's pull back a little bit. Like I see a similar relationship between especially Remus and Sirius, but I think Remus and the rest of the Marauders as George and Fred, where George is the one who's like, okay, let's reel it back. Let's not get expelled. And I think Remus fulfills that same purpose inside of the dynamic of the Marauders. So I do see that type 6 as well. He is so like moody, sensitive, withdrawn 4 that was very much like my first thought, but I do see the 6 as well.
Well, and the thing was like while you were just talking about that, like I do think the moon is his biggest fear because that's when he loses control. Like that's what he craves. And I think like even like outside of the Enneagram, like that was very planned. Is like he is responsible because he does lose sight of who he is like once a month.
Yes.
But like, right. I do think like the 6th, they want to be secure. And that's why he's like on top of his meds and no, his meds. That's not the correct term. His potion.
His potion.
Yeah. And like he wants to avoid like uncertainty. I feel like out of all of these things, if we're like looking at all of the Enneagram type, the fears, the falter, blame, acknowledging their need, their failure, being extraordinary. Like, I think that he definitely wants to avoid uncertainty, and that's like why, and it makes sense because he could like kill someone or you know, make someone a werewolf. So I think that's important, and I love that about him. But I'm also just like, oh yeah, like such a 6. Like I like your arguments. Like that would have been, if you were not so well versed, I would have been like absolutely not. But I think you made a great argument. But I'm like, yeah, he's a 6.
Thank you. Okay, tell me this. What's his wing?
Oh, a 5.
I agree with that, and I think that I can shake on that.
Thank you. I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
okay, cool.
Just not been in sync today, but it's not one of those days where I disagree with everything you say, where I'm like, yes, no, I totally get what you're saying.
I love when we both like, you know, we're like on the same page, but they're not the same number.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, finally. Let's get to someone else we know and love.
Oh my goodness. I cannot believe we made it here. I'm fascinated to see where this conversation goes because I don't think you're going to agree with my number.
Oh, okay.
But first, let me introduce the man of the hour, the daddy issues that this whole episode was really, I mean, these all people all have issues. And most of them center around Harry's daddy, which is what, if you were curious, like where like James Potter, like the ghost of James Potter has left daddy issues.
Know what? The reason I did it was like, these are all of Harry's father figures that like fall short.
You know,
that's why I made the joke.
Also makes sense. I think it's all tied in there. Like,
yeah,
Harry's
I think they're both similar. they're both,
yes.
Yeah, they both double meaning. But yeah.
So Severus Snape, the potions master, until he becomes the defense against the dark arts teacher for a year, and then he becomes the headmaster after he kills Dumbledore. But to be fair, Dumbledore asked for it. Not in a victim blaming way, but in like a secret spy way.
Yeah.
Snape is very like commanding and authoritative. As a professor, all of the students like are always afraid to cross him because he's very stern. He's also, I think, really, in hindsight, as the series has been like dissected, he spends a lot of the series as a villain. And then at the very end, we discover that all of this time that he was working as a Death Eater, that he hated James, and he held this super hard grudge against all the Marauders. He was working for Voldemort. He kills Dumbledore, but we find out at the end that he was actually working for Dumbledore for the duration of the series.
Do you think it was planned since the beginning?
Snape as a character?
Like for J.K. Rowling's perspective?
So here's the thing about she who must not be named. She likes to pretend like she knew every single detail about the entire world and every question she's ever been asked. She's had the answers since she first started writing the first book. I don't believe it. I don't think it's a fun story to tell that she's like always had this fully realized world. However, I do think that she knew about Snape because I have like, I'm obsessed with this series. I have like this whole 8-part documentary about the making of the movies that I'm obsessed with. And they've talked before about when they cast Alan Rickman as Snape for the movies. She sat down with him for like the first movie and told him the ending of Snape's story before she told anybody else so that he could play it with that knowledge.
It's very, how I feel about it is the same way I feel about Slytherin. It is so ridiculous. I think it's great as a fandom. We have accepted Slytherins and understand they're not just all pure evil. But I like understood that and would advocate for that before I read the books. And then when I read the books, I was like, they're all evil and mean.
All like,
and
yes,
like,
yes, in the books, the Slytherins are awful.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, don't pretend like it wasn't written like they were bad people and like the Nazis, I put in quotes, of the wizarding world. I was like, this is like really weird for you guys to, or like at least supremacists. Like, I don't know why we're pretending like they weren't. I feel the same about Snape. I've rewatched a lot of the first, and I was just like, this dude is not, like, there's no way this guy ends up being good. And I just was like, this man is pure evil. He's bullying Harry for like taking notes. Like, he might be drawn, like, there's no way from his perspective he can see. And he just like quizzes him about stuff. This poor boy literally did not know this world existed 48 hours ago. Maybe it was a week. I don't really know. And you're going to bully him about like things of like chemistry of the wizarding world. That's just like not fair at all. So I was just very annoyed with that. So that's all I wanted to say, but I did interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I agree with all of it. And I think, like I said, we discovered that he was like a double agent, but I think a lot of people have just been like, oh, that means he was entirely good the whole time and never did anything wrong. And it's like, no, this man definitely did a lot of things wrong. And his whole arc with Dumbledore is motivated by the fact that Snape overhears the prophecy and tells it to Voldemort, and Voldemort deduces that Lily's son is the person destined to defeat him. And so Voldemort decides to go kill Lily, and it is just to save Lily that Severus decides to betray Voldemort. If he had not targeted Lily, none of this ever would have happened. If he had decided that Neville, because both Neville and Harry could have been the chosen one, if he had decided that Neville was like the destined baby, Alice Longbottom would have died and Snape never would have thought twice. So I just want to like put that out there.
And again, unrequited love for that long is not romantic. It's creepy. Thank you.
Yes. And so to actually get into that real quick, just on his character, he is defined by this childhood. He and Lily meet as kids before they go to Hogwarts, and they develop this really strong friendship. And the two of them, he kind of teaches her what he knows about magic in the world before she gets to experience it, because she is a Muggle-born. And they are the best of friends throughout most of school. As Voldemort is rising and Snape is Slytherin, he gets into the crowd with Lucius Malfoy and the Death Eaters before they are officially Death Eaters. But then he is preparing to join the Death Eaters after he leaves school. And Lily tells him, like, they are Nazis. And they get into a fight. He calls her a mudblood, and that breaks off their friendship. And she never wants to talk to him again. And he loves her from that time on. And like you said, unrequited love for that long is just creepy. But she does in so many ways define his story, and his love for Lily motivates him to save Harry and to protect Harry, give him the sword, everything like that. He's a very complicated character. I just don't think he's the saint that everyone thinks he is. Not everyone, but parts of the fandom treat him like that.
There's just like no, like, also, like, if he were just a good person, he would have done that.
Right.
Like, that's my argument. Is like, if none of that was special, the fact that he did that only because of a childhood love is not
like,
cool.
Do you want a cookie? Like,
I know, it's just like, if you know this terrible thing is happening in the background, do those things.
Yeah.
And if he was a double agent, honestly, it would have made it been more compelling to the story to me personally if Lily wasn't like Harry's mom. You know, like if it was just like a random person who taught him how to be good and he always regretted calling her a Muggle-born and she was a casualty. Like, the fact that he's only doing this because like she has Lily's eyes, ew. Like, that's just not cool to me. And that shows he's a bad person, not a good person, in my opinion. But like, I don't have that much skin in the game. Like, if someone else wants to school me in the email, that's fine. So...
Plus, all the love to the types that we're about to talk about, to discuss.
Okay, it's my turn to type first. And this is what I'm going to do to make it fair. I think he's also a 6. Yeah, so because I gave Remus 6 and he's like one of my favorite characters in the whole thing, I was like, all right, I'm going to get... So it evens out. It was not on purpose. I do like genuinely think they're both 6s. I think you can see 6 in health. And I think actually, like, I kept saying like Remus is the best in health. Like, I do think he could go a couple levels up. Like, you know, there's like, he's still a really great person, but like, I don't think that's the best. He wasn't self-actualized. He's still like a complicated character. And like Snape is what happens if like you're a 6 who just like has never heard of like therapy or self-love or like literally anything.
Never done
he
the
is
work.
constantly scared, like looking behind his back, unsure of what's going on. He craves control in the same way that like Remus does. Remus is like kind and tries to understand and empathize with people, where Snape is like a double agent and needs to be understanding what's going on both sides. And he is so fiercely loyal, like the unrequited love. I'm like, ooh, it's like not cute because he's so loyal to Lily. And he doesn't understand that like not everyone is that loyal all the time. Like, why wouldn't you stand up for me when the Marauders were being mean to me? It's like, well, you're not really that nice to me. Or, and I don't know, she does stand up for him, but she doesn't like stop that from being the reason she like doesn't marry James.
Right.
And like he can't understand that because like I always say when I'm like when people ask me for help typing, which like, I don't know, we don't necessarily like agree with, but I've done in the past. I always say like, do you have a hard time understanding how other people think? And I think like 6s, I've said this before, 6s and 1s, I think a lot of times from my experience and people I know, have the like when you explain their type to them, they're like, that's how everyone is. Like they don't understand that like when people are anxious, like sometimes it's like a one-off. It's not like a constant over planning and meticulous thinking. And I think Snape has a lot of those qualities and like doesn't understand that not everyone else is that way. So I think Snape is also a 6, and I think that's why I'm like all the love to 6s. Obviously, I just like poured into so much love for you in Remus, but also like if you're not taking care of yourself, you can turn into a Snape.
I completely agree. Which I think 6 was not on my radar for Lupin, but I do feel better after like going through all the virtues of a 6, because with Snape, he is skeptical, he is discerning, he is looking to groups for identity. First, it's Lily, and all of his identity is in Lily. He also then is in Slytherin House, and he becomes defined by his friend group of Lucius, of these Death Eaters, and sees a group that he can find security in after graduation in these like uncertain times as the war is brewing. And he attaches himself to this group of Death Eaters, and then he loses Lily and he goes full force into it. He joins Voldemort and he becomes Voldemort's most trusted follower as he throws himself into this like thing bigger than himself. Now, don't get it twisted. The Death Eaters are horrible people. They're Nazis, but like that's where he finds like his group identity. Then that crumbles as it begins to threaten Lily, and he immediately attaches to Dumbledore as a figure to like get protection, to find security in Dumbledore. And then he is so deeply loyal to Dumbledore that the only person who knows his true intentions, he is so loyal to him that he agrees to kill him in order to like further this plan to get the ends to justify the means. Like he loses his one and only friend in the entire world for this greater good. And I think that he has that deep loyalty. And I was interested in not only the levels of health, but also those arrows, which we've talked about a little bit before. And the 3, the 6, and the 9 as anchor points do touch just each other. They form that triangle in the center of the Enneagram, which I'm just now realizing like Remus in growth is like going to those really like supportive, those things of the 9 that I think I see in him are just like the 6 going to the 9 in growth.
Oh yeah.
But the quote that I pulled from the Enneagram Institute about the arrows of disintegration for the type 6 is that dutiful 6s become competitive and arrogant at 3. And I think that we see, especially in his relationship with James, which is like in general, Snape is not only, he is so comparative and competitive and always like wanting what other people have in the way that I also see. And I think arrogant especially in the way that he treats Harry. And like, I think it all makes sense. Like it all just fell into place for me. So I love the type 6. Do you think he's also a wing 5?
Yeah, definitely.
I agree.
Because he's not a 7.
I actually wondered about the type 5 for him as well, because I think he's very secretive, very self-reliant. Like he's all about not showing any emotion, and like he holds so many secrets. He's like Regina. Oh no, he's like Gretchen. His hair is full of secrets.
Yeah.
And So I do see the type 5 in him as well. I just have to say, as I was researching through the wiki for this episode, which I've never done before, and I don't think I'm ever going to do again, because this quote came up on the wiki, and I'm sure it sounds like it was written by a Snape apologist. And so I just had to like share it because it really like was a record scratch moment for me. It says, and I quote, Snape was not a prejudiced individual, despite the Death Eater beliefs of pureblood superiority, but was rather against muggles, presumably because of his sour experience with his own father and Petunia Evans, but held no ill will towards Muggleborns. End quote. And I was, what?
Oh
No.
my gosh.
You don't get to play the Death Eaters.
That is very dangerous rhetoric.
Yeah.
That is very dangerous. Like, if you apply that to the real world.
You're not going to join the Death Eaters and then start splitting hairs about who you are or aren't prejudiced against.
Yeah, no.
So I would just like to...
If you brought that into the real world, that would be not okay.
Exactly. So I just would love, if anybody has any questions, if you're like, I love Snape with my whole heart, and this is very hard for me, like, do some research. Mm-hmm. Do some soul searching, maybe. We are here for you as well to recover from this. Snape.
And, like, again, like, I just don't get how, like, in the eyes of the wizarding community, like, Peter Pettigrew is a murderer because, like, he technically did what Sirius was, like, you know, framed for. Mm-hmm. But, like, Snape is it, like, I'm like, what? Like, I did, like...
A big thing for me, too, in the real world community, in the fandom, the always thing.
Well, I know. I feel really bad. If you have an always tattoo...
I was just going to say...
Maybe we shouldn't talk about it just in case someone has a tattoo. Go ahead. Just say it and then we'll decide later.
I know a lot of people have got the tattoos. And bestie, I'm afraid to tell you this, but it's not romantic. It's not cute.
No, it's not. No, I knew that. I hope maybe bestie was the fandom, not us. Not me. I'm like, yeah. And again, I was older when I read them. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like, I don't think I'd heard about it before, but I was like, I was waiting for him to be redeemed because the thing is, this is such a stupid thing. But the thing about that scene in the movie that always bothered me so much is that the little girl has, I think, green eyes and like older Lily has blue eyes. And like in the books, they all have green eyes, Harry, but like Daniel Land has blue. But it was just really weird that they like show a close up on the little girl's eyes to be like, they look like Harry's. And then they do a close up on her eyes when she's like older. And I'm like, you really should have made them the same color then. Like, just have somebody wear contacts.
On that one.
Yeah, that one. And that's the one thing I paid attention to. But then when I read the books, I was like, this is not enduring. Like, I think this is weird. And then when the conversation came up, I was very glad that other people agreed.
And
so
my biggest thing, I don't think the author knows that it's not romantic because Harry then names his children after Snape. It's like the rubber stamp that's like, yes, he was one of the bravest men I ever knew. Like,
no, he wasn't. What part of that was brave? Because at the end of the day, he could have hidden under like, whoever won, he could have said either thing happened. Like, no one knew except for him. Mm-hmm. And he also, like, I don't think Harry is stupid enough to believe that he was good in the end either. Like, I think it does a disservice to Harry that he would name his child that.
I agree.
Did we just turn into a Harry Potter podcast?
Plot twist, season 4. We're ditching the Enneagram and we're going chapter by chapter. Murjanatu is like, I did not sign up for this.
Oh my gosh. Well, that was such a good app. I love spending all this time with you. I love diving into the Marauders and enemies instead of friends.
Likewise to you. I had such a good time, and I'm so excited for next week.
Catch you at the butterbeer stand.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Typecasting. Leave a review and tell your friends about the show. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Typecasting Pod for more Enneagram and pop culture fun.